After dropping their season opener against bitter rival SMU, Coach Seth Luttrell and his Mean Green look to rebound as they welcome in the Bethune-Cookman Wildcats to Apogee Stadium. Can North Texas notch their first victory in New Denton, or will the Wildcats pull off the second consecutive FCS stunner? We'll talk about this and more coming up live on Mean Green Game Day. That's right, we are back and in a new location up in the TV booth here at Apogee Stadium as we are going to take you right up to kickoff of the North Texas Bethune-Cookman game later tonight at 6, just about 30 minutes from now. I'm Kyle Yeomans alongside Matthew Barrett. We have Josh Conrad and Travis Buckner coming on later in the show. But for right now, I want to talk about the SMU game from last week. It was a 34-21 loss for the Mean Green. There were a lot of positives that they showed throughout the game. Now, moving on from that, let's break down that game and talk about what stood out to us.
Yeah, well, North Texas, they had 26 first downs. SMU had 23, but really SMU was moving the ball a lot more quicker and a lot faster, which led to more possessions for North Texas to get first downs. But really, SMU dominated basically every other category of the game. They were more efficient on third downs. They almost had 600 total yards of offense, which cannot happen when you're in the first game of the season. 572 yards, 300 of those were passing. So the secondary struggled. Would you agree with that?
Oh, I would definitely agree with that. I mean, the secondary a couple of times just looked absolutely, in lack of a better term, pitiful. There was a 3rd and 45 that Matt Davis, the quarterback for SMU, decided to just chuck up to the end zone and ends up with a Hail Mary for no reason almost in the end zone, caught for a touchdown. So that's some stuff that we're going to have to fix as the Mean Green go into this game week 2. Just some stats also, third down struggles as well. North Texas on third down offensively only 40% as they were 2 for 8 actually. For third downs, and then on defense they only stopped 57%, or they gave up 57% percentage on defense, letting SMU on third down. 3 touchdowns for SMU came off a third down as well.
Yeah, and at this point in the season, you're going to have some kinks that you have to work out in the first game of the season, but third downs you have to stop on third down. That's critical to everybody's game plan in the beginning of the year. But another stat that stood out to me was 11.1 yards per pass, and we only averaged 6.2, which really just tells you that the secondary right now is not where they need to be in order to move forward in the season. I think this game coming up will show, since let's just face it, they're not as good of an opponent as SMU. Let's see.
On paper.
Let's see if they can stop this quarterback who does have ability, and we'll get more on that later in the show. But 3 interceptions thrown by Morris. That can't happen. Yeah, that just can't happen. And only 2 touchdowns. You can't go negative at all. 46 rushing attempts. SMU just controlled the time of possession almost this entire game. And it doesn't look like it because on paper they had 31 minutes and UNT had 28, but it seemed as if SMU was mostly in control the entire game.
And another thing I want to go into, I don't want to criticize them too much because it was their first week as a coaching staff, but there were some decisions throughout that game that kind of left Mean Green fans wondering what was going on. The 3rd and short where Morris decided to just throw a lob pass to the right side and ends up getting picked off. That's one of the ones that stuck out to me.
Right.
Another thing is that historically, and by historically over the past 2 seasons, SMU hasn't been a good rush defense, hasn't had a good rush defense. They haven't been able to stop the run. Jeffrey Wilson seemingly had his way in the first half, and then after that they kind of just backed off and he never really ran the ball. I know they were playing from behind for a lot of the game, for all of the game. But at the same time, if something's working, why do you change it?
Right. I mean, he had 15 carries for 86 yards, and he was averaging 5.7 yards per carry, which leads you to believe even if you are struggling, you're trying to work out and see how good your offense is in the coming games. So if you can see that Wilson can run the ball effectively, give it to him, and maybe he can pick up some of those first downs that weren't picked up.
And also, nothing against SMU. Again, they're still in a transition period, being in the 2nd year with Chad Morris. Offensively, they're not really the best team either.
No.
Now, Matt Davis is a stud, and he made it look like himself as a superhero on the field last Saturday, running around our defense almost at will.
Yeah.
What do you think going forward now? Do you have faith in this Mean Green defense to stop upcoming opponents?
From what they showed us last night, it's going to be tough to see how, if they're playing a pass-heavy team, it's going to be tough to see how they're going to match up well against them. I think up front, defensively, if they're running the ball against us, we can handle that. And I think next week when we play, or the next game when we play Florida, I think we'll see a better outcome. But if we're playing a pass-first team, I think there's going to be a lot of struggles this season for the Mean Green.
I definitely agree with that. Later in the show, we will go ahead and talk about the quarterback controversy, and we'll also go into our predictions for some of this week's top games coming up later on here on Mean Green Game Day. Last week against SMU, the North Texas offense had a couple of kinks that needed to be worked out before this week, but at the same time, there was a lot of positives on that side of the ball, some of that being from the quarterback position. Welcoming in Josh Conrad. I know you're excited to talk about this. Alec Morris and Mason Fine. Right now, at the moment, the rumblings are that Mason Fine is going to be the starter tonight. That is still, as contrary to what we originally had, is not confirmed. But what do you think going into tonight? Do you put Alec Morris out there, or do you put the youngster in Mason Fine?
Well, a certain smart analyst last week talked about Mason Fine excessively. Mason Fine is the answer here. I mean, his 2 drives last week were the best 2 drives of the game for the Mean Green. The guy can get out of the pocket, which we need with our offensive line. The guy makes plays happen, and I just saw a leader when he took the field, which I haven't seen North Texas have while I've been here. So I think Mason Fine, he has good touch, he has good passes. One thing for Morris is it's a guy, even easy routes right over the middle, just drag routes. Guy was either too high or guy was too low. It was just, and Morris is a guy who's a good pocket passer. North Texas is not going to have a pocket this season. That's just never going to be a case. So you need a guy like Mason Fine who's 5'9", can get out of the pocket. Mason Fine is the answer here. I hope Latrell sees that. I believe he'll see that. That's my answer.
And you've talked about, last week you talked about how you were so excited to see him come. Yeah, exactly. You were so excited to see him come in and show his stuff coming out of Locust Grove, Oklahoma, the true freshman.
Great YouTube highlights.
His first drive, you were going nuts on the sideline because of how successful he was initially. The second drive didn't necessarily work out in the same way, 2 sacks. That's what I want to ask you now. Morris, throughout the entire time he was in the game, got sacked 3 times. I know the second drive with Fine was more with a second string kind of offensive line. Do you see him avoiding sacks more than he did last Saturday?
Well, I think you talk about the 2 sacks he had. He's also dealing with an offensive line that's much more tired at the end of the game. So he doesn't have the fresh legs that Morris got to deal with. I'm fine with the sacks. Look, this guy, you burned the red shirt on him. You have to use him now. We have a game against Bethune-Cookman. We paid them $400,000 to come here. Let's pay them money so we can play our freshman quarterback. And I just think if Morris starts this game, both quarterbacks play. If Mason Fine starts this game, I don't think you're looking back. I think Mason Fine's the guy.
You don't think Morris will play at all the entire game,
Mason
barring
Fine starts,
a blowout?
If Mason Fine starts, I think it's Mason Fine the rest of the way.
Wow, that's some.
I do have a man
pretty
crush on
bold.
him, but Mason Fine is the answer here.
Here's some stats from last week. Alec Morris threw 24 for 39, passing with 237 yards, 2 touchdowns, and then he did have the 3 interceptions. So not a bad stat line other than those 3 interceptions. If he's able to cut those down even by 1 or 2, that's a pretty solid stat line, especially with a guy who hadn't had any live Division I experience before last week.
It wasn't terrible. It was decent stats. I still think some of the interceptions, he stares down receivers. I mean, maybe we give the guy a shot because they say your biggest improvement is from week 1 to week 2. So maybe give him some snaps, see what he can do. I just think the guy, he didn't have his jersey tucked in. He didn't look like a leader. He looked like a guy from the stands who just put on a jersey and didn't tuck it in. This team needs a leader. They need a guy they can rally around, a guy they can trust. I didn't see that in Alec Morris. I saw it, and I'm going to go with Texas here. Alluded to like a freshman at UT with Shane Buechele, a guy who took the field. He's a leader. When Mason Fine took the field, you kind of felt the energy perk up on the team. You felt everyone kind of like, okay, this is our guy. So I think that's what Mason Fine can bring to the table for this team.
And honestly, as of late in the whole realm of college football, there's been some
freshman
true freshmen that come in and have that electricity that can put a franchise, but a fan base on the edge of their seat.
And there's going to be some downs because they're true freshmen.
Of course, there's a learning curve.
Let's get the downs out of the way this year. I mean, no red shirt. I don't know. He looks good. Our receivers looked good too last week, I thought. You had multiple guys with 8 catches.
Yeah, Willie Robertson.
So get a guy who's going to be here for the next 3 years. Get him some connections with receivers.
And even Mason Fine's stat line, he only had 2 really full drives that he was able to do some work in. 8 for 11 with 74 yards. He led that touchdown drive in his first drive on the field in college action.
Pretty good.
And then he did get sacked those 2 times. That's the only thing that I'm kind of concerned about is the 2 sacks. I know it's a second string O-line, but if you're bringing in a guy who's as elusive as Mason Fine is, you expect him to get out of those types of situations.
And another thing on playing 2 quarterbacks, it doesn't always work out because quarterbacks throw the ball different. There's different touch on passes. Receivers are much better when they know what's being thrown at them. Instead of you go from Morris's kind of slower passes to Mason Fine's a little more faster passes. So I think if you just stick with one guy, the offense is going to flow better. The O-line's getting the same signals. They know, center knows what the quarterback signal is. I just think one guy is the right way to go.
So if you had to choose right now, I probably already know your answer. Is it Mason Fine starting tonight, or do you start Alec Morris and work Mason Fine in later in the game?
I'm going to throw a shocker here. I say let's start Alec Morris for 1 series, get him some playing time. Anything bad, let's go Mason Fine.
So you say start Alec Morris tonight, maybe try and give him another couple chances.
I think it's just kind of his last shot right now. So I'd say let's give the senior his time, but Mason Fine is playing the majority of this game for me.
Okay, all right. Coming up next here on NTTV, we're going to preview tonight's matchup here against Bethune-Cookman right here on Mean Green Game Day.
I want to thank our crowd and our fans, our support, our students. I thought tonight they did a great job.
And it is intercepted at the goal line.
I'm telling y'all, we gonna win. We gonna win. We gonna win. It's coming. I'm telling y'all.
Just keep fighting, keep pushing.
I'm just saying, expect great things from North Texas. Just want them to know we need them to stick with us. We'll be a lot better week 2.
Welcome back to Mean Green Game Day, a special edition as we are up here in the TV booth live as we take you right up to the kickoff of the North Texas Bethune-Cookman matchup later tonight. Welcoming in Travis Buckner as we keep switching out analysts here pregame. Travis, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Kyle. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to get going, but North Texas, in the past they've had success against FCS schools up until last year. Most of the time FBS matchups against these FCS teams are usually chalked up as a victory. Last year they got spanked by Portland State 66-7 on homecoming. This year they welcome in Bethune-Cookman. I personally don't think this is a good matchup for our North Texas team, but what do you think about it? I want to see your thoughts. I want you to go into a little bit of it.
After last week, after what I saw the defense did, which was the secondary could not stop SMU at all. And the problem was the cornerbacks were watching the backfield the entire time, even when they were manned up. Which number one rule of man defense is you do not look in the backfield.
Look in the backfield.
I can't even tell you how many times I saw them looking in the backfield with the receiver running right past them. And so this team is a very pass-happy team. Their quarterback, Larry Brim, only started 2 games last year, but threw for over 1,000 yards.
That's
and so that tells you how much they throw the ball. And I think that's the biggest problem right now for the Mean Green defense.
And not to mention that Brim is also a scrambler at times. He has the elusiveness to get out of the pocket and to escape and get some extra yards on the ground. Now, if you're North Texas, you struggled with this last week against Matt Davis. Now, who would you put out there to try and contain Brim?
See, that was another one of the problems, was the outside containment. And there was one player all last week that I saw do a good job of it every week, and that was number 50, Ladarius Hamilton. He's a linebacker, and he showed great form, and he led the team with tackles, and he tipped the ball that was intercepted. And I think that if they want to win this game, they've got to keep that outside containment. I can't tell you once again how many times they got outside of their outside containment.
And that's a huge thing that North Texas struggled was with the contain.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Then whenever they would bring the contain in, they'd throw it over the top for an 88-yard touchdown from Ben Hicks, who wasn't even the scrambling quarterback last week. So with that being said, do you think this matchup fits well for this North Texas team, or are they going to be able to take advantage of it?
I think that if the coaching staff can learn what they did wrong last week and they can fix all the problems this week in practice, then I'm okay with it. But if it's going to be the same story as last week, I think we got a huge problem right now with Bethune-Cookman.
I mean, it's going to be interesting to watch out. In the past 3 FCS opponents, we, of course, had Portland State last year, which was a 66-7 loss. And then you've had some success. Nicole State in 2014, 77-3 final score with a victory for the Mean Green. And then in 2012, Texas Southern, North Texas beat 34-7. So with that being said, going into this one, we talked about Mason Fine and Alec Morris earlier. Do you see them having success? Because thinking back to these earlier games, it's been a coming out party for some quarterbacks.
Yeah. Well, I think, there's a lot of question marks right now at the quarterback position, but I think that if they start Mason Fine, which is rumored that's what they're going to do, I think they got to stick to let him run when he wants to run and let him throw the ball when he needs to throw the ball. I think that Mason Fine could be the difference maker in this ball game.
Well, that's definitely going to be interesting. In just a minute, we will come back for prediction segment. We will get all our analysts back up here, right here on Mean Green Game Day. Welcome back to Mean Green Game Day. It is time to predict some of this weekend's top games. And I know the slate last weekend was so much better than this weekend is. It's kind of a lull weekend in college football, but there are still some intriguing matchups that we're going to go through. Last week, good job, guys. I'm very proud of us. 22 right and 8 wrong out of our predictions from last week. So let's see if we can keep that up this week. So we're going to start with you, Matt. Going just down the road to Fort Worth, Texas, Arkansas at TCU. Kenny Hill had a huge week last week, but we can also say that about South Dakota State had a huge week against this TCU defense. Who do you see pulling that one out, Arkansas or TCU?
I have TCU winning this football game. I think that they're going to rebound strongly after that scare against South Dakota, and I think their offense matches up well against the Arkansas defense, so I see TCU winning this one actually pretty easily.
Okay. Josh, what about you?
Well, I know you're not a fan of TCU, Kyle, but I'm going to say TCU, they replaced 5 defensive starters this week. They're going to come out much more focused. There's a little Big 12 SEC rivalry here. I like TCU big.
All right, both of you going big on the TCU side.
I am also going to go with the board. I'm saying TCU. Kenny Hill really impressed me last week whenever he threw for over 400 yards. And Arkansas, statistically, has always struggled against a dual-threat quarterback. So I see Kenny Hill thriving in this game.
See, and I'm going to disagree with all 3 of you guys. Arkansas is going to win this game just because I refuse to pick TCU.
Really quick, though, you said our record from last week. Let's note, Kyle had the worst record of anyone on the show.
I had the worst record, 3-3. Still even, though. I'm 500, so I think we're okay. Moving on to a special game in Tennessee at Bristol Motor Speedway. They're turning the racetrack into a college football powerhouse, 150,000 plus. Expected to be on hand for this one. You can't even see the field because the stadium's so big. Tennessee at Virginia Tech. Who pulls it out, the Vols or the Hokies?
Even though Tennessee was pretty much awful against Appalachian State last week, I still see more talent on that side of the ball for Tennessee, and I think Joshua Dawes is going to have a big game, and they're going to win and pull this one out pretty easily.
Tennessee will rebound. They're not going to play as bad as they did against Appalachian State. Virginia Tech, do they have an offense?
I don't know,
Have they
man.
had an
I
offense?
don't know.
Tennessee big.
All right, y'all know I'm the optimistic one, okay?
Yes, you are.
I say Virginia Tech pulls this one out. Tennessee almost got upset last week by Appalachian State. Who the heck is Appalachian State? Appalachian is not a state, okay? So I think Tennessee, I don't think they fixed their problems. I'm not impressed at all with Tennessee, so I go Virginia Tech.
And I'm going to have to disagree with you again, Travis. You and I are just not on the same page like last week. I'm going to go with Tennessee. I'm going to go with the Vols. I think they're going to pull it out in a kind of a home game in Tennessee at Bristol Motor Speedway. Moving on, Texas Tech at Arizona State, a Pac-12, Big 12 matchup. Pat Mahomes at quarterback for the Red Raiders. Who do you got, Matt? I think I have Texas Tech.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you because I think Arizona State is going to win at home. I think they have a pretty good offense, and at home I think is a big advantage in college football, and I don't think Texas Tech is going to have the offense that will match up with Arizona State's offense this week.
Arizona State players are going to have a lot of yards after contact this week. Arizona State, close.
Okay.
Close.
Okay. Just a
But
little
close.
You know what, Kyle? I agree with you. The reason that Texas Tech is going to win, I'll tell you this. All I need is one name. Patrick Mahomes. He's going to lead this team to a victory this week.
I agree. I think he's one of the more – I know he's talked about a lot, but I still think he's an underrated player in college football, and he's going to have a breakout season starting with tonight. Moving on, a battle in Utah. BYU and the Cougars are going to take on the Utah Utes at Utah. Who do you got? I actually have Utah. I'm going to go ahead and make my pick right now.
Well, that's a solid pick because I also have Utah. And the future Big 12 member BYU, I don't think is that solid of a team.
Wow, that's really bold,
But
actually.
Utah will win this one pretty easy.
As Taysom Hill enters his 16th season at BYU, Taysom Hill is one of the best college football players I've ever seen live. He loses tonight, Utah, by a medium amount.
I guess I'm just the odd man out in every one of these picks. I'm going BYU. I think
All right.
Taysom Hill, he can beat you in too many ways. I don't think Utah can stop him tonight.
And then tonight, in just a couple of minutes, North Texas takes on Bethune-Cookman. North Texas losing last week, 0-1. Bethune-Cookman with their first game action of the year, other than a quarter and a half that they had last week against Alcorn State. I'm taking the Eagles for the win, the first win in Seth Luttrell's coaching era. Who you got, Matt?
Absolutely agree. You have to beat this kind of team, Bethune-Cookman. UNT, I expect to win pretty big.
Breaking news, Mason Fine is starting. UNT is going to win.
I think I've seen a trend. I'm picking the Mean Green this week as well.
All right, there you go. So there's our picks straight across the board for North Texas. Thank you for joining us here live on Mean Green Game Day special edition from the TV booth. Stay tuned. Up next, North Texas taking on Bethune-Cookman on NTTV. Thanks for joining us. I'm Kyle Yeomans. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next week.